to NeuroDiverse Generation, the podcast where we flip the script on what it means to thrive through neurodiversity. I'm your host, Jenna Evelyn, and today we're diving headfirst into the quirks, creativity, and challenges of the neurodiverse experience. Whether you're here to laugh, learn, or find a little inspiration, you've found your people. Please note that this program may not be suitable for younger viewers due to explicit language and mature themes. Parental guidance is advised. This show is aired for educational purposes. We are not licensed diagnosticians or counselors. Let's get the conversation rolling. For today's episode, I am thrilled to introduce someone very, very special to me. My mum! With over 20 years of experience in staff retention, succession planning, and legacy and performance management, she's no stranger to guiding others through tough situations. But in our own relationship, we faced our fair share of deep struggles and misunderstandings for over a decade prior to my ADHD diagnosis. There was real damage to heal from, and today we're diving into that difficult past. This conversation is about acknowledging those wounds and sharing how we've worked to heal and rebuild our bond. Ladies and gents, my mum, Trudi du Toit.
Very much,
Nothing's changed. Okay.
Lots has changed, thank goodness.
Yeah, lots has changed. How are you doing today, Ma?
I'm great. Just need my tea.
Yeah, me too, actually. So we had a rather rough decade.
That's putting it mildly.
I'm trying to think of exactly where to start here. Like, how does one kind of address a topic like this? Because it is an incredibly personal, individual experience for each person. And I think there were so many scenarios in retrospect when we completely missed each other. We were misunderstanding each other. The intentions may have been pure, but it was literally almost like we were speaking two different languages.
Yes, I think that sums it up. Different languages.
Shall we dive right in?
Dive right in.
Cheers. Let's do it. Getting up close and personal.
Okay.
So, first of all, tell me a little bit about your experience of being my mom from day one so that we can provide a little bit of context behind what this episode is really about.
You were a bright, happy, talented, special kid who just brought so much love into our family.
Wow. And like, how did you feel though, like going into motherhood? Because if I think about
Terrifying.
yeah. Because if I think about, having to be a mom, I don't think this feeling of like being an overgrown toddler ever actually goes away. I really thought I'd feel a lot more grown up by now. I thought I'd have it pretty much together by the time I was 16.
Well, I was kind of hoping you would, but yeah, well, that shit happens.
So tell me about these first signs of neurodiversity that you can recall from when I was little.
I think the first thing that raised a question for me was when you struggled to make friends as a little thing, even in preschool. Do you remember Liam Legg?
Oh my God.
You had some serious issues. We called him Liam Legg because his leg was in a brace.
This
And they were
makes me
different-
sound terrible.
There were different Liams in the school, so we referred to him as Liam Legg, and you didn't like him. He used to tease you.
No, not tease me. He bullied the living daylights out of me.
So he bullied you, and I came around the corner to collect you from school one afternoon, and there you were in the sandpit with Liam Legg, and you were sitting on top of him, and you had him by the hair, and you were whacking his head into the sandpit.
I regret nothing.
You probably deny it if you could, but that's how I
No,
know.
I wouldn't. I'm very
But
proud.
I looked at that and I thought, well, is she just standing up for herself? Is she seriously aggressive.
Am I raising a sociopath?
Yeah. I didn't want to say it. Thanks for filling that in.
No, Mom,
But-
you need to be very, very
but
real.
I thought to myself, okay, well, look, at least the girl can look after herself.
Yeah, cheers to that.
And I think you've done that in some ways, but there were some instances that were pretty tough. I think boarding school was really crazy, hectic for you, struggling to make friends, and just probably not feeling like you fitted in anywhere. And I understand that. I get that.
Tell me what it was like being a parent in those times of a child who you can see is very capable and yet seems held back by seeming nothings, almost nothings, you know?
Well, we couldn't understand why you couldn't get your shit together.
Thanks, Mom.
You were bright, you were beautiful, you were talented in so many different ways, so incredibly musical. You were smart, smarter than smart.
I just brought her on here so that I could have an ego boost. Thanks for watching.
She did have to pay for it. Anyway.
True story.
Not being able to really excel in primary school was a major concern for us. We'd put you into Red Hill. It was a very expensive sandpit to pay for. And towards the end of your Red Hill career in primary school, we decided this was not going to work going forwards. And that is why we started looking at some alternatives. There were all sorts of rumblings in the background at home. You were getting edgy, you were getting restless, you were getting obstreperous, you were getting challenging in many, many ways. And so I think those were things that did concern us. And as a parent, you sit and you look at those things and you ask yourself, is this normal? Or is there something else here?
And I can imagine it's also like a matter of, you know, is this something that I need to deal with gently? Or if I deal with it gently, am I almost entertaining it? Am I going to be creating more of this behavior?
You know, whenever you buy something from the store, it usually comes with an instruction manual. Kids don't, especially you. I think they burnt all the instruction manuals when it came to you. There was just no knowing ever. And so we were feeling our way through with you.
There was a period of time, I remember, when it was during 2020, when things were particularly rough at home. And I was like house hopping. I was one friend for a few days, another friend for another, you know, family here and there. And I know it's super easy, I think, for a kid in that context to jump up and say, like, you don't care about me, and like, I don't live with my parents, and anyone looking from the outside can empathize in the stereotypical sense that, like, oh, if you were my kid, I'd never let you, but they don't have context. What was your biggest fear during that time when I was away from the house for about 2 months? We weren't even speaking. I was ignoring her WhatsApps. Sorry. And how did you push through that to, you know, keep trying? Because you kept contact with me. You sent me messages that said I love you, even though they pissed me off, and I was like, no, you don't.
My worst fear was that you would succeed in taking your life. My other fears were that you'd never get to a place where you'd live a happy, fulfilled life.
That was a big one for me.
To the top of this thing. It was a big one for me too. It felt like we were in a long, deep, dark, black tunnel with no light at the other end. It was just a never-ending dark pit. It consumed us for long periods of time. I was concerned that you'd go off the rails.
Oh, I did a few times.
I know. But I couldn't deal with it. And I think that was tough. Because when you have a kid,
You're supposed to have all the answers.
You're supposed to have all the answers. I didn't have any answers, not a single one. You were gone for 2 months at that point in time. You left and you walked out one night after a fight with your dad, and then that fight was extended to me. I always joke with him. I tell him that there's one consolation for me, and that was that he was an arsehole for longer than I was an arsehole as far as you were concerned.
No.
Yeah, we were arseholes. You told us that, and you told us what we should do, which cliff we should go and jump off of, and you told me how much you hated me, and things like that kind of stick in the back of your head. But you know, when it's your kid, you don't give up.
It's so interesting. I've also got these, you know, if I go back to like why I felt the way that I did in those times as well. I remember letters that you'd written me like less than 6 months prior, where I think out of pure frustration with the situation and just like not knowing what else to do, you told me I was a monster, and that you couldn't believe that this was the person I'd become, not in a good way. And that is always like, that's always stuck with me, because that for me was just so symbolic of the misunderstood. I felt misunderstood my whole life. I've kind of come to accept it, and I've come to learn to capitalize on being underestimated, you know.
Yeah, we know that.
Tune in for another episode on that soon. But I think there were so many damaging things that were said and done, and at the end of the day, it was a retaliation to a retaliation to a retaliation. But there are things that stick. There are so many damaging things that have been said that we've had to, I think, really talk about and like uncover over the years, and have lots of discussions about it, because in retrospect, it's easy to say, oh, well, I felt like this and like you felt like that, but it wasn't the case in reality.
I'm sorry, you're not a monster.
I don't hate you.
I told you we'd need the tissues.
Do you want a tissue?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Here you go.
I'm sorted. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank
Grandma.
you.
For context, I call her Grandma. I know she's my mother. I'm aware. I'm also aware that even though she's graying, she's not like old, and she certainly doesn't look it. But come here.
Thank you.
You're going to feature in the podcast today. This is Tina, the Queen Wiener. And she is
my grandchild.
Yeah. So
my first.
Yes, her first. Her first of many if Ronan gets his way. But we'll see how that goes.
Wait a bit. Wait a bit.
So this is Tina. She's my therapy dog. She came in because she knew this was going to be an intense discussion today. And I realized this can also be like quite a difficult like topic of discussion for you, because there's an intense vulnerability in associating your story, one's mistakes, one's things we wish we could have done differently, whatever, with your brand and your name, and putting it out there so boldly. So I want to congratulate you for that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad.
How did you navigate feeling like misunderstood and isolated and quite alienated, I can imagine, while you were trying to connect with me, while you were reaching out to me, and you got this like brick wall in return? Because I was like
not interested.
I think I was so closed off to the possibility of any kind of trusting relationship at that point, because I didn't trust that people wouldn't leave. And that's a symptom of rejection sensitive dysphoria, which we know now.
In hindsight.
And can therefore manage everything here. Is like, well, in hindsight, you know. But I think it's important to talk about these things so that other people who are experiencing the same thing maybe don't have to feel as isolated as we did.
We both felt isolated, but for different reasons.
Yeah, and I think we were both craving a very close relationship, but I think that looked different to each of us, and we didn't even realize that. Literally lost in translation. Okay?
Indeed.
Tell me a little bit.
So the relationship that I've always wanted with you, I feel like I have now. And maybe it was my inability to relate to a younger you. Because when you were a baby, it was easy to bath you, dress you, feed you, love you, massage you, hug you. And then suddenly you became a little girl, and then the little girl became a bigger girl who developed all sorts of problems and issues and complications.
And these needs became more complicated.
When you're running a home and a business and a family, and you're trying to pay the bills and make ends meet, and this stuff lands on you, you don't always respond in the best possible way, especially when you don't know what the heck you're dealing with. And we did not know what we were dealing with. Eventually, when it became completely insanely crazy in this house, and it did, and it remained that way for a long time.
About 10 years.
I think I lost my shit with you so many times.
Oh my gosh.
Completely.
But like vice versa as well. It was screaming matches. It was as ugly, I think, as a family dynamic can get, and dysfunctional.
I think one of your teachers, Mrs. Fulcher, we used to speak, and she'd say, "How things going?" And I'd say, "She's up for adoption. I'll pay someone. Let me know if you know of anyone." And she'd say to me, "Send her to me." And you'd go and visit there for a few days, and Dad and I would go, we just breathe a little bit. We just try and find ourselves and create a bit of order out of the complete and utter chaos that reigned in this house. And then you'd be back again. So it was tough. It was so tough. I think that period of 2 months when you were gone, I didn't sleep for 2 months.
I can imagine.
When your kid's out there and you don't know what the heck they're getting up to. You don't know if they've got food. You don't know if they're sleeping warm. So I packed you a suitcase with all your warm stuff. It was in the middle of winter. And you thought that I was telling you, here you go. Here's your stuff. Off you go.
But the same way when you organized for me to go to Mrs. Fulcher for like a weekend at a time, I felt that relief that you talk about me not being there. And I felt therefore that I wasn't wanted, that you just wanted to get rid of me as far as possible. You wanted me out of your hair, out of your space. You didn't want to deal with me.
I think if we knew what we were dealing with, we would have coped better. We would have dealt with you differently. And it was even when you were in a patient of a specialist psychiatrist, not even he could actually help. No, he didn't even make much of a difference. And that was after your 4th suicide attempt. We had our hands in our hair.
But I really hated that psychiatrist.
I know.
He irritated the living daylights out of me. He was based at the mental institutions, this clinic that I had been admitted to semi-voluntarily.
Voluntold.
Yes, exactly. And I think I don't know, he would stand up in these seminars about DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, and he'd crack all these jokes, and everyone, all the crazies who are sitting there with me, alongside me, a fellow crazy, don't think I'm discriminating, and they laugh away, and they're like, "Oh, I love that doctor, no, he's so funny." And I sat there and I was like, that's a bit of a racy joke. And that's like coming from me. So I don't know, maybe I think it was just a scenario where occasionally we meet people that were like, please don't breathe around me, please and thank you. And he was just one of those for me. But that lack, I think that speaks to the importance of having the right psychiatrist. Because if I look at my doctor now,
there was a complete lack of connection there.
Yes. And because of that, there's no way that he could pick up whether or not the medication was actually working for me. But he didn't really ask questions to find out how I was feeling. He dealt with it from such a clinical perspective that it was almost devoid of personal, and it was like he was using humor as a replacement for that in my mind, which I didn't like. But yeah, get a doctor that works for you, man. And look, that's not to say that neurodiversity is something that needs to be medicated.
No, not neurodiversity, but with neurodiversity come a lot of conditions that do need to be medicated.
Yeah.
Things like bipolar, things like ADHD, that comes along with neurodiversity. And if there was one thing I think I learned and that I mentioned in a previous podcast is, if one doctor doesn't work for you or one process doesn't work for you, for example, you didn't need dialectic behavior therapy. You needed cognitive behavior therapy.
Yeah.
I felt like they were experimenting with you, different drugs that weren't working that well.
Sleeping tablets that would knock me out within 10 minutes. And then I would wake up again at like 4 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't go back to sleep. And that was torture.
And the sleep it was another issue because your day became night and your night became day.
But I'm also kind of biologically wired that way, Ma. I don't know if it's a part of my ADHD or just a part of me.
But sleep issues sleep issues are part of ADHD.
Insomnia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's been quite interesting for me in having discussions with my psychiatrist recently is she posed this to me, something that I was like, whoa, I don't know about that. And I still don't. But it's not a perspective that I actually considered when it comes to conditions like ADHD. So when I got on the right meds and the right dosage and everything, and things just started turning around for me, and I was like, wow, this is what life can be like.
I remember.
Yeah, no, it was insane. But I think I was very cognizant of the fact that like I would probably have to be on medication for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it didn't come from a place of like, okay, let me put it this way. My doctor said to me in our recent appointment, she says, Jen, I think we should start we don't have to do it right now, but just open yourself up to the possibility of reducing the dosage of your meds eventually to 0. Now, this freaked me out because there are certain things like the emotional dysregulation that are somewhat chemical.
Yes.
And so because of that, I don't think from a comfort point of view, I'll ever go off my meds. But the possibility that what she posed to me, the theory she posed was that neurologically, we don't have those bridges, right? Let's use that metaphor. We don't have those bridges between...
You mean ADHD people don't have those bridges?
Yes, ADHD people, neurodivergence, whatever. There are gaps between neurons here that should be there, right? This is Science 101. Welcome to South Africa. There are gaps between the neurons. Okay. Yeah, listen, luister mooi nou. Luister liefie.
I know all about those gaps. You don't have to tell me.
But essentially, the medication is supposed to help you to build those neurological bridges, to strengthen those synapses, to create pathways neurologically where there weren't before, so that you can wean yourself off the medication and then rely on the new coping mechanisms. But that is obviously quite heavily from a behaviorist point of view, and it doesn't consider the clinical implications. What do you think about that?
I think it might be a bit soon now. I think she's planting the seeds. I think in due course, you might change your mind. I hope so. But I think it's something that you're going to have to monitor. You're the only one who will be able to tell, who will know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow, we're getting very distracted.
We are. What's your next question?
Were there moments where you doubted whether things could ever improve between us?
Oh, heck yes.
And what gave you hope to keep going? These questions are posed to both of us, by the way.
I think when you said that how much you hated me, that kind of stuck with me. But you know, when it's your kid, you don't stop trying ever. It's your kid. You just keep persevering. You try different things. So there was no stopping. It was not an option for me. It was something that made me exhausted. Made me do research, made me join a support group, made me get advice. But you don't stop because it's your kid.
Would you say that there was any part of your upbringing or your childhood that influenced some of the mistakes that you made as a parent?
For sure. We go into parenthood preconditioned, pre-wired, based on previous experience, based on what we've seen, what we've learned, and what we've experienced from our parents.
And what did that look like for you?
My mum she grew up in the Victorian era. She had me when she was 40. My dad was a military man. You know, he just looked at me and I knew if I didn't put a cork in it, now I was going to get a clap. So he couldn't hug me, for example. When I went off to university, I asked my mum, why does dad not want to hug me? Because he used to actively push me away. And she gave me a piece of very important information there. My dad's father passed away in the Great Flu. Before he even turned 2, he was a baby. Grew up without a father. He had an older brother, a bossy older brother who used to really bully him and put him down wherever he could. And his mom couldn't cope with the 2 boys, put him into boarding school at the age of 5. So
I thought I had it bad.
If you think of that, he didn't come into the world from a loving family where he learned how to be a dad. He didn't have a father. There was no role model. So from that point of view, he struggled with his own kids. I think it had a profound impact on my brothers. Sad for me, very sad. And in some ways, I think that has been passed on to their sons. So that is a legacy, not one that we're proud of, but it's one that's there. That's where we come from.
I think
and the big thing is breaking the old patterns.
The generational cycles.
The generational cycles. Now, where's that tissue? I told you we'd need them. Okay. That's a sad thing for me. Still sad. Far away.
Such a sweetheart. Love you.
My family is so important to me. Even though they piss me off sometimes.
I think that's incredibly powerful. Is a matter of choice in that, you know, there's a matter of choice of like, I don't like you a lot of days because you do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I know.
But I will choose to love you every single day. And because of that, the way that I communicate these needs with you is going to be different.
That's right.
You know,
I think especially romantic love is moonshine, roses, and people get married and they spend so much time and money planning that wedding that we forget that the thing that makes it stick is how we conduct ourselves in the marriage after the wedding.
It's the marathon after the sprint.
It's the marathon after the sprint. We've often spoken about that. So we sometimes focus on the wrong things. So we think that love is a feeling. Love is a choice. It's a daily decision. So even when you piss me off, I still choose to love you, and I still choose to behave towards you in a certain way.
And it makes all the difference, I think. What is one thing that you wish you'd known about neurodiversity earlier that might have changed the way that you approached our relationship and me as a kid? Because I get that, like, that sense of, you know, I don't do the whole Gucci Gucci goo thing, right? I I really don't. I don't do
talk
baby
baby
talk.
language. No, I don't do baby talk.
But I work with kids on a daily basis, and to be honest, that hasn't been something that has prevented me from connecting with kids. If anything, I think kids have gravitated towards me because kids can sense authenticity and sincerity.
They do. And if there's one thing that I'm so impressed with, it's the way you deal with youngsters, with little ones. You certainly did not get that from me. I think that must have come from your dad, perhaps. I hope so.
It doesn't come naturally to me. It is a choice.
Really?
It's a deliberate thing of like, going back in the archives in long-term memory and like, what would have made all the difference to me at that age?
I think what did matter though is, contrary to my father, you had a dad who adored you, changed your nappies. He did the goody goo talk and the and the playing and the throwing you onto the couch so that you'd bounce and squeal with utter delight. So he was the entertainments committee and I was the disciplinarians, and it wasn't a nice job to have, but somebody had to do it,
But I'm pretty sure that's going to be me in my dynamic with Ronan. Like when I have kids one day,
you're going to be the disciplinarian.
Just touch wood there. I'm like predicting
touch
a bit
wood.
here.
Touch wood.
Yeah.
So you wanted to know what was the one thing that that I would have done differently if I'd known about, well, let's answer that. If I'd known about neurodiversity, it was not even a word in my vocabulary. ADHD was there, but we'd had you tested when you were a little tiny tot.
When I was like 4.
Something like that. And it came back that you were exceptionally bright, but not ADHD or ADD.
Again, though, when tests, I mean, we're talking now 2005, if I was 4.
Even prior to that, maybe. I can't even remember when it was.
Early 2000s.
And it was on more than one occasion that we had you tested as well. So
I think
we thought that that had been taken care of, so that was not really a consideration. We really did not know what the heck was this.
Yeah.
What could this possibly be? I think in many ways, even if you look at bipolar today, bipolar has a different name.
Yeah.
It was manic depressive in those days. And people didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
They just thought, this is a strange one. But
a little bit of a cracked cookie, eh? Yeah.
The lift doesn't go to the top floor. The box of Smarties is not full.
Maybe it's just the orange one's missing. Anyway. No, I get what you're saying, that it wasn't even a term, there was something I wanted to tell you, but what did you say now? This happens a lot.
And you lose your way. Yes, I know.
About the diagnosis that we sought out when you actually went to go and get me tested when I was little. And remember, like around that time, testing was for things like ADHD. It was pretty basic.
Yeah, very unscientific as well.
It was pretty basic, and they weren't aware of things like masking capacity and time blindness, and a lot of these terms and effects that we're aware of now, and the fact that emotional dysregulation is such a massive symptom of it.
Not just of ADHD, but of so many other neurodiverse conditions. So it's easy to confuse.
I was chatting to Hannah Kemp in the interview the other day, and she brought up a really interesting point that I'm going to make a short about when I get the time. Where she said ADHD is clinically and
medically,
it's an incorrect terminology. It's completely wrong.
Yes, it is.
And it should be called executive dysfunction disorder.
Yes.
Although I don't love the idea of running around telling people I have EDD.
No, that could be something else.
They're like, is it like worse than the other one, or?
You are a crackpot, you know that. You're just crazy. We love you anyway.
I hope you love me because of it rather than in spite of it, because it is, in a sense, it's separate from me. ADHD is not me, but it has become a part of my identity.
I think one of the things that I have learned to appreciate about you is how you have identified that hyperfocus is probably your secret weapon.
Yeah.
The fact that you were a little blonde thing and so many people would look at you and think, oh, it's a little blonde number. And you would floor them every time. You'd take them down in flames.
I'll argue like a lawyer.
And I think there was one thing that drove me crazy.
Get it from my mama.
It's that you'd have these darn assignments to submit for university. And I'd be hanging outside the door, biting my nails with minutes to spare. You'd left this to the last minute. You are a last-minute merchant of monumental proportions.
But I pull it off.
And then you submit it with literally seconds to spare, and you end up getting a distinction. And, you know, I've had to learn to step back and say, I can't live your life for you. I can't fix you. I can't fix these things for you. But my gosh, I wish you'd start earlier. But I know you can't. But you've learned to work with your hyperfocus.
Yeah.
You've learned to, within a very short space of time, perform absolute miracles. And that is something that I have immense respect for. I mean, I take time to read something and process it. And by that time, you're done, long time. It's implemented. You're off down the road. And I think you get impatient with me.
No, I don't get impatient.
But it's okay if you do.
What do you mean when we're like working on stuff together?
Yeah, when we're working on stuff together and I take longer.
No. It's not because you take longer. It's when a thought process is interrupted.
I get it.
I have to see a thought process all the way through, and then we can examine it more closely afterwards.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'd lose it because my brain jumps 8 thoughts ahead.
That's here we were going to talk about.
What do you think? Well, was the most misunderstood aspect of me as a neurodiverse child, and how did your perspective shift over time as a result?
I think that if there was one thing that drove me crazy, it was the fact that you missed 30 school days in your matric year, and your dad and I were contemplating, how is she going to pass her matric year?
But I don't know why.
And are we going to have to pay another year of school fees? My gosh.
You were worried I was going to have to repeat matric.
We were. We were seriously.
Was it because I was on daily report?
You were on daily. You were an absolute delinquent.
No, but I was. But that's why I'm saying I don't know why you were so concerned about me going to school, because even when I was there, I kind of just sat and watched Netflix and bunked.
Don't say it.
I went and smoked on the soccer field.
No, don't.
History. Sorry, Miss Rip.
So I thought that you were lazy. I thought that you were a last-minute merchant, that you were unable to plan, that you were completely incapable of managing your time and prioritizing.
Which isn't wrong.
And when I'd address it, you'd come out at me with all your guns blazing.
Because I think
with
now
so
we
much
understand
anger
why.
and hatred, and I was, oh my God, I can't even open my mouth. And she is onto me. So I think that was part of it. And now understanding what it is that we've been dealing with. I have clarity. I've accepted. I can't live your life for you. You need to sort these things out. You need to get your own shit together. Seriously.
What do you mean? I thought my shit was. Is it not? I mean,
You have now.
Well,
but
I left some at my house,
thought.
but I can get it all together here tomorrow if you want.
And that's what happens. She leaves stuff behind all the time. I pick up her specs, her tackies,
My babe.
her
My
vape,
keys.
everything, her keys, everything, and I just put them in a spot where she knows she'll find them.
You're a blessing, Mom.
I know.
Really.
So are you, fortunately.
No.
Now we kind of get what we're dealing with.
How has our journey impacted how you view yourself as a mother? Have your ideas about motherhood and self-care changed?
I think I was a terrible mother. And that has not changed. Hopefully I'm wiser now. Hopefully I have greater understanding for you.
I don't think that you were a terrible mother. I really don't. I know.
I felt like I was.
No, I think there was too little emphasis placed on intention from both sides when it came to understanding that.
Yes, that's true.
But more than just intention, it's no, there was something I wanted to say.
But you know, most parents, when they're dealing with this, they do stop and think, am I a terrible parent?
Yes.
And it's got nothing to do with that.
But I think there's a lot to be said about the power in vulnerability in parenting. You know what I mean? The power in being able to say to your 4-year-old kid, I don't know what to do here, but I want you to tell me how you're feeling, and I'm going to sit through this with you and whatever. That's known as the gentle parenting technique, but that wasn't the chosen, parenting technique when I was raised. When I was raised, it was kind of that behaviorist period of the cry it out phase.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you were dealing with like a world that was wired in that way, that's the direction that they give you as a first-time mom, and
but that's
we
also
underestimated
the programming of where one comes from. I remember you
Yes.
throwing a tantrum in the middle of Woolworths one day because I wouldn't buy you the jelly beans you wanted.
And I hate jelly beans now. Can you imagine?
So we were in the queue, and then at that stage the queue moved forward, and I neatly stepped over you and looked at you like, I didn't know, who does this belong to? and paid for whatever I wanted to pay for, and was heading out of the shop when you came charging after me. And the lady behind me in the queue came past and looked at me and said, 12 out of 10. So I'm not sure if that was sarcastic or if it was intended well, or whatever the case might have been.
She intended it well.
But that was parenting in those days. And, I think the big thing when you're dealing with a neurodiverse child is that you've got to be on top of things and so much more flexible and adaptable.
I disagree about being on top of things. I think the emphasis,
perhaps letting go more.
Not letting go. It's not even about control. It's about not having to keep this perception going all the time that you have it all together when you don't. Like, you don't have to make your kid think that. And there's a lot of power and humanity
Yes.
in doing that, because grace given is grace shown. Grace shown is grace given. Does that make sense? You show me what it means to show yourself grace, and I learn how to show myself grace. You show me.
See, I'm still not sure how you do that with a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old.
You talk straight, Mom. Particularly
just being real,
neurodiverse
maybe.
kids, they want to be treated like a person with autonomy,
Yes.
regardless of their age. And if you can just keep that, I think, in consideration, then it makes all the difference.
So no more corduroy pants then.
Oh my gosh, I hated those cords. She made me wear them like every winter day.
They kept you warm.
Everyone else was pitching up to kindergarten wearing like pink and Barbie and like all these fancy, beautiful, sparkly things. And I pitched up in freaking velvet corduroys and a polar neck and my ugly black tackies. Or my boots. Were they boots?
I'm sorry.
I hated it.
I'm sorry.
This is why when I have children, I'm going to dress it up like a doll. It's because of you.
We'll see when we get there.
All your fault.
And I'm going to take those clothes off and play in the mud with them.
What was the most healing moment for you in this journey with me? Was there a conversation or an experience that stands out as a turning point?
Several. I think every time we speak about the shit that went down, every time I can look at you and say, what did you need to feel like that we were not making you feel? What did you need from us that we were not giving you? What was it that was going through your mind that made you do this or that or whatever? And every time we were able to talk about that and process some of the rubbish that went down in this house, my gosh, there was a ton of it. It brings healing. It brings a new way of understanding and seeing things. It's enabled me to connect with you differently.
And it's almost like you can read my mind now in a lot of ways. Like I get in after like a long day at work.
I just look at your face and I know.
And she knows. She just knows. There's this intrinsic like connection where I'm
time to have a cup of tea. Do you need something to eat?
Time for a Couchside Confessional. if you will. Now that we've come through the other side, what are you most proud of about how we've rebuilt our relationship and found new ways to connect?
I think in one of my previous podcasts, I mentioned that watching this process happen has been like watching you turn from a chrysalis into a butterfly, and to watch that butterfly fly. Now, that process came because you took the initiative, because you decided that you were fed up with the way things were going and that you wanted your life back. So you took the initiative to get a proper diagnosis. You took the initiative to rebuild relationships that had seriously gone to pot, to show understanding for what we've all been through. And I think in many ways in your relationships, you've done that. Yes. And I'm so immensely proud of you using your ADHD and whatever you've gone through, your experience, to make a difference in the lives of other people. I feel finally, where I've helped so many senior managers build legacy, where I've helped them with their teams, problems with communication and conflict. Now I've had to focus on practicing what I preach. I've had to do this with you, but it's nice to be able to finally focus on my legacy with you.
Ma, you are a massive part of the inspiration behind why I'm able to sit here and do a podcast today and feel okay unmasking, genuinely. I've had to teach myself somewhat, and it has been something that I've had to get accustomed to. But I decided when I decided I was going to do this podcast that I don't want this to be a podcast where it's all put on and it's all branded and it's so like minimal editing. Swear if you want to,
no makeup,
here with a cup of tea and a box of tissues, like it's great. And it was a conscious decision for me to unmask, to consciously unmask in these sessions, and to consciously unmask more and more when I go to work, and to unmask more and more with my kids, and to unmask more and more within my relationship. Because the more comfortable I can get with that, the less, or shall I rather say, the clearer my communication is as to what's going on in my brain. It's connected.
More authentic.
And it makes more sense because I almost validate it for myself. And you are just a massive part of my support structure. I couldn't do what I do without you. And I'm so grateful. In the back of my mind, there's always this, it's a bit morbid. So, don't think me a sadist. But in the back of my mind, there's always this thought of like, one day my mom isn't going to be here anymore. And I'm going to be by myself. And I don't know yet how I'm going to do that when that day comes. Thank God it hasn't come yet. But I think just talking about healing relationships and stuff, that was what was quite important to me with that, is that I don't want the people I care about, the people I love, to die without my having resolved whatever needed to be resolved, without my having made every effort to, make it a positive relationship, because I've got to answer for those actions at the end of the day. And I don't believe that there's some big purple dragon in the sky who's going to hold me responsible because I smashed Liam's head into the sandpit when I was 8. I'm pretty sure he deserved it. He would have said something. Anyway, but there's an element of accountability there, Thank you for your vulnerability and your sincerity and your realness, You're a champion.
I am hugely, hugely proud of you.
Thanks, you guys. Tune in for another episode next week. Bye.